The history of women is often marred with stories of female oppression that went on for hundreds of years. For the majority of early human history, women were seen as property or trophies rather than humans. However, even though the majority of women would not rise to prominence until more recent years, there have been several women throughout history that made a name for themselves and secured their place in history books for all eternity. Today, we'll be taking a look at 10 of the most beautiful women of antiquity. If you could travel back in time and meet any of these women, which would you choose and why? Let us know in the comments. Princess Qajar. While there were many women throughout history that men considered being particularly beautiful, few compared to the great Princess Qajar. Her beauty at the time was unmatched, but she may not have had the typical beauty that we all see today. The princess lived between the 19th and 20th centuries, and to say she met the qualifications of modern beauty would be an exaggeration. As years have passed by, beauty standards have changed dramatically. Princess Qajar is no exception to this rule, as she was known for being a particularly large woman who sported a prominent mustache. These days, it has become standard for most women to remove any indication of body hair, even though it's completely natural for women to be just as hairy as men. Though, contrary to this modern standard, women's body hair was held in high regard in some parts of the world all throughout history. Princess Qajar was widely considered one of the most beautiful women to have ever lived, and she used her beauty to her advantage. She became a prominent political figure and played a major role in women's rights throughout Persian history. Even though she only lived around 100 years ago, prominent figures in women's history would not become mainstream for several more decades. Though there are still certain countries around the world that refuse to allow women to have rights that are equal to that of men. It's a strange world we live in. Ana de Mendoza de la Cerda. Ana de Mendoza de la Cerda was a prominent woman in politics throughout Spanish-Portuguese history. She's most well known through the stories of Friedrich Schiller and Giuseppe Verdi, becoming known as the One-Eyed Princess. She made a name for herself in a time when women meddling in politics was completely unheard of. She used not only her husband, but also a close friend to influence Spanish politics and left a long-lasting impression in the Netherlands. At the time, the Netherlands was partially dominated by Spain, but her influence would remain for many years to come. She's known for exposing several political secrets, selling information to rebels in the Netherlands who were desperately hoping for freedom. She worked alongside the State Secretary of Spain as a spy, but the two were eventually exposed and their reign abruptly ended. The two were both imprisoned, with the prison guards and everyone who met her describing her as a particularly feisty person. However, she was also described as being undeniably beautiful, despite the fact that she lost an eye at a very early age. By all means, she was a very powerful and unique young woman, so it makes sense that her story was shared by so many historians and politicians over the years. Catherine the Great. Catherine the Great is a name that many of us are likely familiar with. She's one of the most famous rulers of all time. She made a name for herself when women of her time period were being oppressed more than ever before. She's known for being one of the most powerful women to have ever lived and become a ruler in Russia for many years. She worked alongside other Russian leaders and directly influenced the lives of most Russian citizens for several decades. What makes her rule so impressive and unique is that she wasn't even Russian. She actually came from the time of the German Empire and married a Tsar. Her role in developing the Russian Empire during the 18th century cannot be stated enough. However, one of the lesser-known aspects of her time as ruler is that she was known for being strikingly beautiful. She's known to have been a woman with many lovers who would receive certain favors from these men in exchange for her private time. She's usually depicted with very prominent curves and beautiful skin and symmetry. By all means, she was the living embodiment of the ideal woman of her time. Cleopatra. Cleopatra is most well known for being one of the most beautiful women in history, at least during her time period. She was one of the final rulers of ancient Egypt before its eventual demise. She's also known to have been the lover of at least two prominent Roman emperors, likely explaining how she was able to help Egypt thrive for such a long time. Aside from this, she's often remembered as being a very strong and independent woman, ruling over her people with an iron fist and asserting herself anytime she needed to. Contrary to many other women around the world who lived during this time, Cleopatra was doing very well for herself without needing the help of a man. However, her life was far from easy. Countless attacks were planned against her and her children, some of whom were believed to have been fathered by the notorious Julius Caesar. Cleopatra was met with much success throughout her life, but after she passed away, Egypt almost immediately collapsed. Without a strong leader who could help ease tensions with other countries, the country could not stand on its own. Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn has a very impressive yet tragic story. She was known for being remarkably beautiful, but her stunning looks took a backseat to the influence she had over the people of England. She became quite famous after she became one of Henry VIII's 6 wives. Even though she was only one of 6, she became one of the most popular women in politics at the time, with her continuing to be the focus of many films and television shows to this day. At the end of it all, she lost her life in a very gruesome way. During her time with Henry, she saw England abandon the Catholic Confederation in exchange for establishing the Anglican Church. After all was said and done, she and her followers would benefit greatly from Henry's time and power. However, a loss of trust led to her losing her life, though she remains a prominent figure in European history to this day. Mumtaz Mahal. The life and times of Mumtaz Mahal led to the construction of one of the most impressive buildings ever created. She was the wife of the Emperor of India, the Grand Mughal. She was known all across the country for her captivating beauty, but also for how dependent the emperor was on his wife. The two had 14 children together, proving that their love was undying and true. However, after giving birth to their final child, she lost her life, marking an early end to their wonderful marriage. This sent the emperor into a crisis after he no longer had his wife to lean on. Mumtaz is known for having a massive impact on her husband throughout her lifetime. She was not only known for being incredibly beautiful, but she was also compassionate. After she passed away, the emperor had the Taj Mahal built in her honor, using it as a burial ground for his deceased wife. It has been rumored that after she passed away, the emperor's hair almost immediately turned white from stress and mourning. Christina of Sweden. Christina of Sweden is said to have been the first woman to sit on the European throne. She made a name for herself in many different ways, with one of her most interesting traits being that she was raised similarly to how a young boy would have been. She was the heir to the throne, but up until this point, that job had been exclusively reserved for young men. This helped shape her entire life. There were rumors that had been circulating about her having a secret love life, with her rule being closely linked to the conflict of the Reformation in Europe. For many years, she ruled over Sweden as the country was deeply troubled, but she led the country through several successful battles and wars, all the while trying to hide her Catholicism from the public. At the end of it all, she went into exile in Rome. Stories about her many lovers and her unusual personality continue to echo around the country to this day, with her being considered a woman who was several centuries ahead of her time. Nefertiti. The bust of Nefertiti is one of the most popular items on display in Berlin. The story behind Nefertiti is very interesting, as she's said to have ruled over Egypt along with her husband throughout the 14th century BC. At the time, the empire was incredibly successful, with Egypt being one of the most prominent countries in the world. Her beauty is said to have captivated her husband, with her having a large part in the way he ruled over the country. We don't know too much about what she would have looked like, so we don't know if her beauty was widely recognized or if it was simply in the eye of the beholder. Whatever it was, she's known for being one of the first female rulers in world history and played a major role in how women's rights and opinions would shape the world in the coming years. Elizabeth of Austria-Hungary. One of the most popular stories about noble women in German-speaking countries is the story of Elizabeth of Austria-Hungary. She was the wife of the Emperor of Hungary and became an empress herself, playing a major role in politics throughout her husband's reign. She was widely known for her beauty, but she also had a very tragic upbringing that led to her taking the throne in Austria. She was known to have been oppressed by her own family, mostly at the hands of her mother-in-law, who wanted to see to it that her son got his way. Elizabeth was never allowed to spread her wings and truly explore everything she had planned for politics at the time. Regardless, she remains a very important and popular woman in political history to this day, with her beautiful looks earning her a place in history books. Joan of Arc. The story of Joan of Arc may not fit in too well with many of these other stories, as she's known to have kept her hair short and often dressed in masculine clothing. Sometimes she would even go as far as wearing armor, leading to many scandals at the time. To make matters worse, she also frequently spoke about having divine visions, but these have never been proven. Regardless, she's most well known for helping to end the 100 years of war that had plagued France and England throughout the Middle Ages. Signaling hope for all the oppressed people in France, she rode at the head of the army and helped to liberate many parts of the country during her reign. What eventually led to her demise was her insistence on dressing and looking like a man. She was deemed a heretic by the church and ended up at the stake. However, she had left a lasting impression on France, with the country finally freeing itself from the occupiers only a few years after her death. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like button and ring the notification bell for more videos.